This is a video about how I process the soil pigments that I find around here. Most of the soil here is sandy with fine rocks and kind of a fine powder mixed in. And so I use water to get those fine particles separated out. A variety of sifters and containers to do that. I'm going to turn slowly here. So what you want to do is get your pigment into a size that you can handle. Put it in, I like these jars because they're tall and so you can leave the heavy stuff in the bottom. But I put it in with water and you can see how the fine stuff gets suspended in here. And so what you want to do is capture or at least separate your fine particles off from your really fine sand, and I do that using a very fine tea strainer. So I would pour that first jar through a tea strainer into here, and just pour part of it and then fill it up with water again, pour part of it to keep all the heavier particles in the bottom. So then you have to let this settle. You end up with all the fine particles settling on the bottom like this. Some pigments leave a cloudy, not everything settles out. Some pigments completely settle and leave the water clear. So then I would siphon this off, and then I'm left with a jar with just the pigment in it, which I then pour into my coffee filter. And then over here, I've got the coffee filters that are drying. So I've got two filters that have the very fine particles in them. And then this is what's left in the bottom of the jar. You can see there's some fine stuff on the top, but there's this sandy pigment in the bottom. And that will mull up into a watercolor, but it is not fine enough to make a pastel out of. So I usually separate those into several jars. So for example, here I have a jar of the fine Phillipsburg pink, and then this is the sandy stuff that was left in the bottom. And I keep them because sometimes the fine particles will mull into a slightly different shade than the heavy particles. So I just hang on to all of them.